So I solicited input from the pixel heads about what are the most common questions / problems that people are having this particular season. So we're going to use that as not quite a script, but pretty close to it. All right, so here we go. The number one updated thing that we want to tell everybody about is these little switches that are underneath this. Very gently, take that off. We've got 4 little switches here. These are output resistor toggle switches, and it changes the value of a little resistor that's on the data output. This little switch right here, the very first one, corresponds to this output. It's right now on 249. This one, the other side, is 33. So what you do is just, you can poke through that lining and just push that little switch. When your wires are like this and they're attached together, then 33 is where you're going to want your switches. If you had separated wires like this, and some people, instead of buying a 3-conductor pair like this, they'll get a positive and negative pair like that, and then they'll just run a separate wire for data. In that case, you may be fine, or you may be better with the 249. But when they're in a ribbon and they're connected down a long run like this, or bundled in another way, then 33 is usually your friend. Here's an Uno. Also has the same little switches. Okay, there's only 2 outputs on the Uno, right here and right here. The default is 249, but a lot of times if people are having troubles with flickering, you need to switch that to 33. There's one of these switches to correspond to each of these outputs. You may not need to switch them all. You may be able to leave some on the 249. So if you're having flickering, especially if you have a long wire for your data before it gets to the first pixel, the numero uno thing to do, take off your ESP32 and flip the switch, flip the dip switch. Number 2, most important thing. So because it's necessary to take off your ESP32, we need to go over the proper way to reconnect your ESP32, because a lot of times people connect it wrong. First thing to tell you is don't remove this or replace it. So don't take it off or put it back on while you've got this thing connected to power. And that goes for a lot of other things too. Don't make connections or disconnections while you've got power going through your device or your LEDs. When you go to put this back on, make sure that you've got it lined up correctly. The antenna should be sticking off to the side. All right. The USB port should be on the same side as the power in. Okay. On an Uno, the USB port is covered by the fuse. That's on purpose. Let me show you now the wrong way. This is wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. If you have your ESP32 connected here and you power this, you probably have destroyed your ESP32. It's probably no good anymore. Let's show you the wrong way on the quad. Here's the quad. This is wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. Your first clue should be that it's hanging way over the board like that. That's not the only way you can do it wrong. If you connect the ESP32 and you've got pins hanging over the edge, that is wrong. That will damage your ESP32. Don't do it. Make sure when you put your ESP32 back on that those pins are covered. The same goes if you go too far the other way and you've got exposed holes that you don't use. But that's another possibility, and that would also be wrong and damage your ESP32. This is the Ethernet version. It's the same as plain onboard antenna version as far as its orientation and its placement. Ethernet that way. I'm going to throw this little tidbit in. A lot of times people get an external antenna version, put this on, or this is already on, and they turn it on and they're like, I can't get any Wi-Fi signal, or it keeps dropping all the time. If you have the external antenna version and you have this little gold thing here, if you don't connect the external antenna, the Wi-Fi signal will be so extremely weak that you may not even see the access point. And if you do, it may not function very well. So if you have the external antenna version, don't expect anything if you haven't connected this little wire like that. So we're going to talk about data boosters now. Now let's say it is really long. You're going way out here, say you're going 100 feet or something like that. And then you're having flickering. One thing to try is the data booster. Here we have it. A couple important things about the data booster. It has an arrow. This is the data inside. This is the data outside. This represents our pixel string. It's not to scale. There's 100 feet between here and here. If you get here and your pixels are flickering, they're doing bad stuff. You've switched this to 33. It's still doing bad stuff, still flickering. That's when you may want to put a data booster in between these two. The best place to put this is somewhere around the middle. So putting it right next to this, right next to the output, is not going to help you. Putting it right next to the pixel, not going to help you. You want to put it somewhere in the middle. And I say somewhere about in the middle because you want to put it somewhere convenient. And so it's going to depend on how you're running your wire. So somewhere about the middle that's convenient. That's where you put this. And then you just connect it ground, data, positive, ground, data, positive. Another thing, important thing about the data booster. The data booster has the same switch on it, the 249 to 33 resistor switch. It is by default set to 249. So if you've set this to 33, set that to 33, set that to 33. And if you're still not getting the results that you want, if you're still getting flickering, you can try playing with these switches. Try switching them back and forth. Okay, when it comes to waterproofing these, you can do it any way you want. I do have, and these are available on AliExpress, but they're also available on DrZzs.com. Run your wire through, make your connection, run your wire through, and then you can tighten this sucker down, tighten these things down, and that's pretty waterproof. It'll be in the middle of your string of wire. It should be pretty safe. Generally, you don't need a booster coming off of the modern Unos and Quads. Only if it's a really long distance might you need this. The more common reason to need a booster is when you're going from one section of LEDs to another section of LEDs. And if this distance here is longer than about 10 feet, then you're going to probably need one of these. You don't want to put it necessarily right next to the beginning. You don't want to put it right at the end. You want to put it somewhere in the middle that's convenient, or as convenient as you can make it. If you're not sure if you might need a booster, get one or get multiples. They're pretty cheap. And the thing to do is to try it first without it. And then if you realize that you need it, then you can add it. When you're doing lights like this, there's going to be lots of occasions where you are going to come to a point where you need to splice some wires. So how are you going to do that? This is one way. Not recommended. This is a great way to have a bad connection, get some water in there, whatever. So twisting the wires together and wrapping them in electrical tape, not the way to do it. The gold standard then is use these solder tubes, or as I affectionately called them for a while, the soldery melty connectors. You strip the wire on both ends, slide it in there, hot air gun the heck out of that till the solder melts, and then you're good. Waterproof, and it's a solid connection. You should really plan on doing this. If you want your wiring to be top notch, you want it to last a long time, this is the way to go. There are other ways to splice wires. This is a Clickets. Clickets are really nice because they're fast, but they are not nearly as reliable as the solder tubes. Clickets are supposed to be waterproof. When you're using these, you slide each wire into one of those tiny little holes, and then you clamp it down. When you clamp it down, you've got a tiny little strip of copper down there. It's kind of sharp that goes into the wire. And that may or may not make a great connection. I've had pretty good experience with them. I've had some fail. If they fail, you just try another one. They're fast, they're convenient, they work for the most part. But it's a good option, especially if you're in a place that's hard to deal with, or you're in a hurry, or you just want to try and get away with it. Use these. If you're planning a splice and you know it's going to be there for a long time, you know it's going to be in a place where it's going to be really hard to get to later or something, use these instead. These are convenient. These are nice. I would use this like inside of a box if I know that it's going to not need other kinds of waterproofing, or I don't have to worry about size or anything like that. Then these are fun too. So somebody said, how do you check the fuse? You can hold it up to the light and you should be able to see the little squiggly metal that goes along there. Hopefully, if you're doing these kinds of things, you should have a voltmeter. Okay, you hear that squeal? That's continuity. That's this symbol on the voltmeter. And when you do that and you get the squeal, that means this side is electrically connected to this side and the fuse is still good. As far as which fuses correspond to which outputs. On the Uno, it's not really an issue because there's one fuse, and so it covers all the outputs. On the Quad, so these two correspond to this first fuse. The second fuse gets the next two. And then after that, each terminal has its own fuse, the next three terminals. So this one goes to that fuse, this one to that fuse, this one to that fuse. We're going to talk about wires. A lot of pixel manufacturers give you power injection wires. So sometimes the wires that are coming with your pixels right out of the box will have bare wire at the end. When you plug this in and power up these LEDs from the controller, those are live. And if they touch, that's a dead short. And that will blow your fuse in an instant. And it could damage your pixels or it could damage your controllers. If you have these, if you take out your pixels and they still have these, cut them off. That's it. Just snip them. But this, at least with them cut like that, you've got a lot less chance of them coming together and making a short. When you are playing with your pixels and you're splicing and doing things, don't work on them while they're powered on. Okay. And I don't just mean like go to WLED and click the power button. I mean, disconnect the power. Because if you have power running to these, even if they look like they're off, there's still power in these wires. And if you just put your wire clippers through this and snip those, that's also going to be a short. You're also going to blow your fuse, and you also could potentially damage your LEDs. So don't work with your wires. Don't splice your wires. Don't make connections or disconnections with the power on. Okay, disconnect the power at the power supply, or at least at the Quad or the Uno, whatever you're using, before you make connections, make disconnections, or splice any wires. Okay. The most important thing to cover on the software part is that if you're using one of these boards that you get from me or from Alnet China, the international store, Quindor has now created, and it's been out for a while, but he's created this installer website. This is going to supersede other instructions that you may have seen about, going to WLED directly and, downloading the latest version, and then starting ESPhome flasher or some other flasher. Those methods, I would say, are old. Skip them. Don't do that anymore. Go straight to this website and do it this way. We have noticed, we mostly being the pixel heads, of course, have noticed that if you download a version of WLED and you use this ESPhome flasher to upload it to your ESP32, there is a high likelihood that you will have a corruption and it won't work. ESPhome flasher is great. It is great for what it's for, but it is now been replaced with the web flasher ability of the install websites. Don't use ESPhome flasher. Now there's a couple things I want to point out. Your device comes with WLED on it, I promise. But there are, as you go through the troubleshooting process, sometimes where the fix is potentially to reflash the device. So if you're going to reflash the device, you can go to one of these pages. We'll pick the Quad page. If you have the onboard antenna version, that looks like this. That is antenna board. It's got the big black rectangle. Next option on the list, antenna external. This is antenna external. Make sure you have your antenna connected or you're not going to get very good signal at all. AE antenna external. This is the Ethernet version. It has an onboard antenna version underneath it, but if you bought this one, you bought it so that you could have this Ethernet connectivity. So make sure you choose the one that you have down here. If you're doing the AE Plus, the AE Plus is this version, which adds a few things. Some of them add more data channels. Some of them add, they all have the touch sensor. Some of them have a microphone. Some of them have the SD card slot, which is there. Some of them have all of it. Now, if you have your device connected directly to your computer, you've connected it to your USB cable and you connect your USB cable to the computer, then you can just hit install and it'll go through the process. If you flash your device this way, it will wipe out everything else on the device. It'll wipe out your Wi-Fi settings. It'll wipe out your presets. It'll wipe out any of your segments or any of your LED output configuration stuff, RGB color order, number of LEDs. All those things will go bye-bye. Do this if you're troubleshooting and you're not sure if your ESP32 is functional or if it's the problem, then do it this way. If you just want the latest version of WLED and everything else is working fine on your device, don't do this. Instead, do the over-the-air update. If you want to do the over-the-air update, you go to this link. All right. And each of these, again, this is for the quad, but each of these devices has a page. Okay. So most commonly, you're going to use this one, DigQuad V3. If you have Ethernet, you might use this one, Quad V3 Ethernet. The others, if you know what you have, then you might need one of those. Most people are going to be using this one. A few people will be using this one. So you download that. Let's just click it. We'll download it. And then once you've downloaded the correct version, then you go to Config, Security and Updates, Manual OTA Update, choose the file that you just downloaded, and then you click Update and it will do its thing, okay? That's how you update over the air. The next thing to warn people about is presets. If you really get deep into presets, you may get to a point where your WLED installation gets corrupted or it goes bad on you. This is actually a lot of presets, I think. I'm not able to tell you what's a safe number of presets, what's too many presets. There's too many variables. I can't tell you. But I can tell you that there are people who have problems because of presets. So keep your presets kind of simple. Do the ones you need to do, but don't go too crazy. Ignore Home Assistant projects that create a new preset with the API every time you change something. So here's the way to back up your presets and also your configuration in general, if you wanted to transfer it to a new device or something like that. Config, Security and Updates, scroll down, and here you've got Backup Presets and Backup Config, and then Restore Presets and Restore Config. So you go Backup Presets. It's going to give you a file to save. And then to restore it, you go to Choose File. Here it is. And then Open and then Upload. And then the same thing for the configuration. You can back it up. And it puts the name of the controller in there too. So this one's for my desk LEDs. So you can keep them separate if you have multiple controllers you want to back up. And then choose the file again. There's the config, CFG, upload, there, bingo. Let's go over a couple things about segments, because segments give people a lot of trouble sometimes too. Segments lets you divide up an LED strip or a string into multiple sections that you can control differently. It's important to remember that your presets save your segment data. Right now I'm showing no segments. All my LEDs are in one segment. But when I choose a preset that has segments defined in it, it creates my segments. So I've got now these 3 segments. If a segment is unchecked and you make a change, the other segments will change, but not the one that you unchecked. If you're having troubles and your segments seem screwed up or they seem like they're causing you troubles, each one has a little trash can. Just hit that little trash can, segment goes away. But if you had saved it in your presets, when you click the preset again, that segment will come back. Main things to remember are the check mark activates the preset. When the check mark's here, you can make changes to the preset effects and colors. Segments that are unchecked don't change when you make changes to effects and colors. And each segment has its own separate power button. And presets save segment data. So when you activate a preset that had segment data in it, whatever's in the preset will override whatever you had for your segments. So people say, oh, I set up my segments and then now they're gone. Probably what happened is you made a preset, saved it, then made segments, then activated the preset. If the preset has no segments in the data that it saved, then no segments will show up here when you activate the preset. That pretty well covers the most common problems that we've been seeing recently. But if you're having other issues, things we didn't cover in this video, come to Discord, go to Facebook, ask your questions, get your answers. As always, thanks for watching. Until next time, adios.